Why do you think that there's been such a significant rise in sports industries in recent years?
Well, I think there's several reasons. The first one is an obvious one, kind of. There's been a rise in the number of kids playing sports, but more specifically, the reasons for the rise have been there's been a kind of an over-aggressive nature to certain training programs, to training kids in whatever sport they play. Some of the kids aren't taught the proper techniques. So, for example, young pitchers, if they don't know how to throw the ball right and they just step on the mound and they're throwing pitch after pitch, and they're not using the proper technique, they're placing themselves at risk for injury. The schedules that kids play now, their game schedules are almost coming year-round. They'll play on multiple teams. For instance, if a kid plays on a high school soccer team, you might be in 2 or 3 club teams as well. And so they're not taking a break during the year to give their body a rest to kind of catch up from the stress of year-round activity. And then there's also a category of athletes who play multiple sports in one season. So they might play soccer and football, or they'll play basketball and another sport, and it just adds the stress on the body and oftentimes causes what we talked about before, an acute injury or one of the overuse injuries. Baseball, track, those are some of them. But really, it's almost any sport, whether you're an individual athlete or a team athlete, you can sustain an injury. But it's really what you're referring to is really the contact sports where you see a lot of the more severe injuries like football, rugby. Those would be some of the examples of those.
Yeah, I left out rugby. We had a horrible...
Rugby, you don't have much equipment either. So that's
those guys are tough. Come on. Those guys are tough, but... I can't help it. I have to interject this. One of my years in high school, my sophomore year in high school, we had a coach who, back in the 70s, who by any stretch of the imagination these days would have been sued out of existence. We started with, I believe, 110 players, and the last game we fielded 38. The rest were injured. This guy didn't know anything about coaching, and the next time I see him, I got a little something for him. I mean, he was a horrible, horrible person. And, in this day and age, he wouldn't have survived 15 minutes because these alarm bells would have gone off. But what do you do with these overly aggressive coaches? How do you reach them and tell them, sometimes you're pounding your students into the ground. Sometimes when they're hurt, you don't tell them to run it off. When they have a broken foot, take a few laps.
Right.
And I guess that this isn't part of your book, but what do you do with coaches that are, especially at a high school level, that are just outright incompetent?
Yeah, you try to educate them as best as you can. You ask them questions. You make the effort to get involved with their sports programs. You ask them what their training strategies are, what they do. You kind of get a feel for how they try to prevent injury.